Um, okay, so just a couple of things. As I said a minute ago, please be sure to mute yourself. That would be really very helpful. And we are going to have parts during which you can make comments on the chat, and we will stop and take a look at them and address your questions if you have them as we go along. Feel free to react if you want to. I will not be looking at the chat while we're talking, but I will go back to the chat when it's time to do that, and we will address your questions. Okay. So, as you know, our topic today is being creative with visual journaling. And that may seem a little silly because journaling is a written thing, we think, but it is also possible to do the same thing with visual as it is with the written word, which is to express yourself, either feelings you're having, thoughts you're having, things you want to express, just pure whimsy, if you're feeling happy. All of those things can be expressed with visual elements as well as with written ones. Hold on just a second. Okay, that's better. Oops. Someone was waiting. So as I said a minute, yes, it's Marcia. As I said a minute ago, the meeting is being recorded, and it is also, I hope, streaming on Facebook, although I'm still not sure that I did that right. It seemed so simple before, but now it appears very difficult. So the meeting should be about an hour, but it may take a little longer, so I apologize for that. Like I said, it is being recorded, so if you have to leave earlier, you can watch the recording and you will not have missed a thing. Okay. So let's just start with why I picked the people that I picked to be in this Zoom chat with me. The reason that yes, sir.
Excuse me. Can you speak up a little bit, please?
Sure, absolutely. Let me get a little closer to my microphone. So the people that are with us tonight that are in the presentation are Sante, Lynne, Scullion, Linka, Behn, and Cheryl Tuttle. And I will talk about each one of them in just a minute. But the reason I picked them is because I am very enamored of their artwork. In lots of different ways. They're all separate artists. They don't produce work that looks alike, but I just find their art really inspiring and really engaging and beautiful, and I respond to it really well. And so I am basically pleasing myself by inviting these people here. But I think that you will really enjoy what they have to say too, because they're very smart and they've been at this for quite a while, and they're very talented people. So I know you're going to enjoy yourself. Okay, so let me share some slides. Everybody see that? 2 sketches? Yes? Okay. So we've got 2 ways of looking at visual journaling tonight. One way is the Sante, Lynne, Scullion way, which is more kind of a traditional sketching version of doing a visual journal, but is most definitely still a journal. The next way we have of looking at visual journaling is much more of a pictorial, expressive kind of finished artwork sort of way. And this is the way that Linka and Cheryl do it. This is Cheryl up here, and this is Linka there, and this is Scott, and that is Lynne. Frequently people call this kind of thing a sketchbook, but we're going to call it a visual journal because that's what we're talking about tonight. We're not talking about sketchbook. The thing to remember, though, is that there are parts of visual journaling that are pretty much the same no matter what your journal looks like. And some of those things I identified when I was going through the things that we discussed beforehand and looking at the artist's work. But I think that you're probably going to find other things that are similar as we go through the artwork and as you hear the artists discuss their work tonight. So the things that you might want to think about as we're going through this are that the images in a visual journal tell a story about the artist, but over time. So as you'll see, especially from Lynne's work, for instance, she's talking about how she actually did some of the sketches that are interesting her now decades ago. So the images that you're going to see are over time, and that's what visual journaling is all about. And so you can go backward and forward in time by going into the back and the front of the book. Or if you're like me, you have more than one, so you can go from one to the other and see what you were thinking in this period from this journal and a more modern one from a different period. They are also collections of images bound in a book. Hold on. You know, it's a journal. There are a lot of different ways to bind a book. And so we're going to see one of those ways tonight. We've got a picture from Cheryl's work that shows a kind of an alternative way to bind a book. But they're all in a book form of some way. Also, visual journals are tools of discovery and tools of learning. And they are themselves, the images, a source of inspiration, not just for the people who are viewing them, but repeatedly for the people that are making the journals. So Linka brought that up in some of the things that we were talking about before. And then they also help the artist explore what interests them more deeply. And I think that's really an important part about keeping a journal. And this is something Scott is going to talk about. The idea that instead of just rushing right to your medium, for instance, clay, you can step back and figure out some things before you go to the clay and end up with a more successful piece or a more enjoyable experience with your medium when you've actually sketched something out to begin with. Okay, so we're going to start with Linka, an introduction of Linka. I just listed everybody in alphabetical order. So Linka is a mixed media artist with 18 years as a graphic designer, while she was simultaneously doing art fairs and commissioned portraits. She has a BFA from Texas Women's University and an MFA from our shared alma mater, Goddard College, in interdisciplinary art. She says, I am an ADD creative, think squirrel from the movie Up, diving into many interests, making books and journals, portraits, mixed media, paintings, abstract sculpture, murals, and teaching. I encourage creativity in any form and believe art is her native language as an introvert. Scott Sante, many of you know, graduated from the University of New Hampshire in 1972 with a BA in fine art with an emphasis in ceramics. A year later, he established his own pottery in Naugatuck, which he operated for 5 years. In addition to making functional pottery for sale, during the time when he had his private pottery, he taught private lessons in his studio as well as classroom lessons at the Creative Arts Workshop in New Haven. In addition, he founded a small pottery school in a frame shop in Westville. And after closing his pottery, he followed a different career path and did not return back to clay until 2013 when he joined Wesleyan Potters and hiatus from the craft of more than 35 years. Excuse me. Okay, Lynne Scullion has a BA in Art Ed from what is now Rowan University and an MALS from Wesleyan, where she studied under Mary Risley. I did not know that. That makes her kind of magical, I think. I also have a variety of arts credits from a few places in New York State, including SUNY New Paltz, Skidmore, and the College of St. Rose, plus many years of classes at the Pottery, and almost all of her pottery is functional, if only marginally inferior. Cheryl Tuttle has a bachelor's degree in fine art majoring in illustration. She then earned a graduate degree from the University of St. Joseph for curriculum and instruction. She has been an artist since she was a child. She has worked in metal, clay, jewelry, illustration, painting, fiber, and mixed media. I never really settled on one medium, but they all show up somewhere in whatever I'm creating at the time. My current focus is in mixed media journaling. Awesome. Okay, let us start with Scott. We're going to start with Scott and with Lynne.
Start with Scott.
Ready?
Yes, Scott, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay.
When I was approached about visual journaling, my first comment was, I don't do that. You know, I do chicken scratching in a notebook. Even though I've had a number of years of drawing lessons and a number of years in pottery, I still feel that I'm not really I don't pay a lot of attention to details when I'm actually doing stuff in a journal or my notebook. I use the notebook more for working out basic ideas. And you can see this is a perfect example of what I'm doing. The images in the notebook, as you can see, are kind of playful, I guess would be the way to put it. I even have eyes and mouths on a couple at the bottom there. It's like I was working for Disney or something. But in any case, I do play with that, and that I respond to the images in a way that I begin to understand and coalesce an idea that I want to express in my media. In this particular case, it would be clay. I also work in wood, and I'm just starting to work with metal. But you can see the idea of the teapot, you know, not perfectly straight up and down, although the one on the bottom right is fits that bill. I started working with cutting off the bottoms and looking at that. So when I started to do the drawings, I went immediately to doing the kinds of teapots in the upper right-hand corner, upper left-hand corner, I should say. And for me, as a teacher, I typically don't sit down at the wheel and then think, what am I going to make today? It's a process of understanding and looking at designs that I know pretty much what I want to do. The only time that happens is when I'm asked to do a demonstration by a student. You know, can you do big platters? Well, I have enough wherewithal from a design standpoint to be able to do that and have a fairly decent platter come out, at least in the throwing. And I also have to admit that, as you notice, I don't use color in any of my drawings in my notebooks. And I noticed that, you know, both Linka and Mary Ruth and Cheryl used lots of colors and different kinds. I don't think I've ever seen Lynne's notebook, so I'm not real sure. I don't use that because I spent so many years as a black and white photographer that I don't think about color until I actually have a pot ready to color. That's probably a stupid thing to talk about, with the idea that what I'm trying to do is understand what it is that I want to make. But I find that using the notebook helps me to understand the relationships. I don't know if you have a copy of it, Mary Ruth, but there's a drawing I sent you that has lots of just silhouettes of one side of a pot, all with slightly differing. I don't know if you used it or not.
No, I didn't use that one. I'm sorry.
That's the type of thing that I use when I'm looking at making vases and whatever. For instance, I want to be able to apply, you know, the standard kinds of things that people do with golden ratio. You know, woodworkers and architects all use these naturalized or natural ratios and whatever. So I play it with drawing. I'll do strictly one side. I'm waving my arms here, which you can't see. I'll do one side of a single pot 20 times with slightly varying the actual design, where it bulges, where it there's a concave point, where there's a mark where it definitely, you know, expands and then contracts and then expands again. I'll do that over and over and over again to understand how the different elements of that pot work together. And then I try to put that together in real life once I've worked through that process.
Yeah, I think you were talking about, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I think you were talking about working out those relationships when we were talking before, like
Yeah,
the
exactly.
like the relationship between the wood piece and the pottery piece.
Yeah, I mean, this is the drawing in the upper left-hand corner is really the kind of thing I'm talking about. I knew that I was going to put, I wanted to do a pot with a wooden cover, but I wanted to have some flair to it. And this one actually came later than the one on the right-hand side. And as a result, I drew this several times. Actually, I have several pages of similar drawings trying to understand the relationship between the finial, the wooden cover, the edges, and then trying to reproduce what I thought was the results later on. So my notebooks are filled with these drawings of stuff that I do, and I get to maybe 10% of them in clay. Most of the time, it's just the thought process. I also use the notebooks to resolve problems with the mechanical creation of something. So for instance, I drew these covers a number of different times in a lot more detail than you see in either of the two drawings here, trying to understand how the relationship would come together. So this, you've got, for instance, on the pot on the right-hand side, I have this flared lip, but it is essentially related to the ribbing that's on the bottom of the pot, which is also related to the finger marks that are on the middle of the pot. It's all related, and I processed that function into retaining that kind of an idea in the cover itself.
Now, one thing that you were saying before when we were talking is that you think that that activity that you were just talking about is what students don't do that they should do.
Absolutely. I'm a teacher, and I taught quite a bit when I owned my own pottery. I mean, literally hundreds of students. I've been teaching now for about 3 years, 4 years, 3 years maybe, at Wesleyan again. And in my mind, when I say I'm a potter, my mind says I'm a pottery instructor. I don't know if that makes any sense. I don't really consider myself to be an artist. I'm a potter, but where I think that I really excel is really communicating the issues of making pots and making good pots, i.e. well-designed, well-constructed pottery. My communication methods with students and the way I interact with them, I think, are the strong points. So my notebooks, I have a very strong belief that when a person starts out, and even some of my students who have been taking a number of classes have not yet made the transition to sitting down and worrying about their skills as opposed to worrying about the design and what they're going to make. It really, there is no dividing line as from a skilled basis between worrying about your skills or having your skills reaching a certain point where you can stop thinking about the skills, but it's a mental process with which a person suddenly feels that, well, I know enough about making pots. I could probably start thinking about what they should look like instead of inventing a pot the minute I sit down at a wheel. You know, and you start thinking about what is it that I want to be able to do? Do I want to make place settings? Do I want to make, functional candelabras? Do I want to do whatever, whether it's sculpture or whatever, but you have to understand a little bit about the design of what you want to do, and the skills fall into place. You just forget to think about the skills. I have many students who are actually very skilled, but they make the same pot over and over and over again. And it's like they can't break that cycle. And so I use my notebooks to try and do that. So my notebooks are one for my own inspiration, my working out problems with design, problems of construction. I also use them as a tool to teach my students so that while they're drawing or while they're working, I'm drawing and showing them how, things should flow, and the relationships between covers and thicknesses and heights and things work differently for different kinds of pots. And then I also encourage my students not only to do similar things that I do, but also to use the notebook to maintain a record of what they're doing. And that requires them to learn some very basic drawing skills. I mean, mine are pretty basic at this point. But it's very easy to do. And I find that if a person sits down and uses the notebook to even record what they're doing, the next time they look at that shape in their notebook, they start thinking about how to modify it and how to move on with their work.
So what you're saying is that they might want to think about actually sitting down and drawing the pot that they just made.
Yeah. Again, I don't use any color, but I do know that a few people do use color, and there are a lot of other tools. I mean, it doesn't have to be a notebook. It could be an iPad, whatever. But drawing out designs, starting off, taking a blank page, making some. As a woodworker by the name of Mike Pekovic talks about, he starts off with just drawing straight lines, trying to draw parallel lines, and then diagonal lines, and then curved lines, and making a number of them just to get your hand working, and then moving on to actually doing the design. And he takes it to an extreme. From what I do, he puts 50 small designs, all little rectangle designs. He's building furniture though, it's very different, but he fills his pages. He'll do several pages, and he'll pick one and then start expanding on it. I tend to work quickly, as you can tell from these drawings. You know, I sketch them, and if it doesn't resonate with me, I move on and do it again, you know, in trying to correct the differences in the ratios between the finial and the cover and the width of the pot, something that I feel works. And so that's the kind of thing that I try to instill in my students as well. But I don't know if you
So,
classify it as visual journaling.
yes, I would classify it as visual journaling. So, hold on. So, Lynn, pardon me for a minute, because I need to go find Lynn's presentation, because she sent me one from that she had made herself. So you may talk amongst yourselves for a minute while I go find Lynn's presentation. I'm going to stop sharing. Anybody have any questions for Scott?
Scott, hi, it's Mary.
Mary?
Forgive me for the hat. I just ran in from my evening walk, and once the hat goes on, it can't come off because the hair is like ridiculous underneath it. But I do, I really appreciate that you talk to your students about doing this. I try to get them to do the same thing because I too have students who make the same pot over and over and over again, and trying to get out, you know, and they make it beautifully, and trying to get them out of that repetitive nature and get beyond that. I think these drawings and journaling is great. And then I have one thing that I would argue with you on. You are an artist. Don't ever say you're not.
Thank you.
Okay.
I agree.
Thank you very much.
Scott, this is Linka.
Hi, Lisa.
So when you're sketching, you are repeating shapes and then adapting shapes in your next sketch, and then abandoning that and adapting shapes again. That's what every visual artist does. They
Sure.
find some way of expressing it visually so you can compare one to the next, to the next, to the next. And it's a progression of refinement, which then at some point you're ready to abandon the sketch in order to create in your final
Yes. Usually I'll get to a point where I said, you know, this now needs to be a pot, or it needs to be a wood turning, or, you know, something of that nature. Just as sort of an aside, I don't want to take much more time from anybody else, but I have noticed that some of my older notebooks, I will be sketching now, and I say, oh, this is an interesting design. And then for some reason, I'll pick up one of my old notebooks and I'll find that I've done it 4 times. And that usually tells me, okay, I've got to do something with that now.
Yeah.
And so I move on, you know, and try to create that. One of the biggest issues that I find, and I think the drawings help the students in that nothing, if you want to throw something away, it's easy to do that with a sketch. It's not so easy with a lump of clay.
Yeah.
And they should get used to throwing stuff away. So I'm sorry, I've taken up a lot of time, so.
That's okay. So now we're going to talk about Lynne, because Lynne has kind of a similar use of her visual journal slash sketchbook. So going back to my original thoughts there at the beginning, the things that have the practice of these 4 artists have together, I noticed that Lynne's journal and her description of it definitely tell a story over time, And they also help her explore her inspirations more completely. Would you not say that, Lynn?
Yes, I think that's true. Before I say anything else, I want to say that Scott is a consummate teacher. He helps me all the time. He has been a real inspiration to me and a big help. And also, Cheryl and Linka, I wish I could use color the way that you do. I think in form. I don't think in color, and I wait to see what the piece wants to be when I'm finished creating it. But this is a really old drawing. And Scott, you were saying about the development of skills, and then you work on your skills and you work on your ideas and you go back and forth. I didn't have the skills to make this piece when I drew it. I wanted to make it. It was from a beautiful flower. It has a leaf that comes down and then small flowers grow up to the middle. I think it might be called a Solomon seal, but I'm not positive because, as you see, it was a while ago. So I wanted to make that, but I had no idea how to do it. And I had to learn different ways of structuring clay in order to make it. And I went back through my sketchbooks, and I do that a lot because sometimes there are just really beautiful flowers or fish or just things that I see that inspire me, but I don't know what to do with them. So this was an old one. So here was the sketch again, the one on the left. Tried a couple different things. I tried to work with the same idea, but different ways of putting them together. And then one of the more recent ones is the one on the right. And I did a couple pieces that are sort of similar to that, which I think come next. Oh yeah. All right, that was the first one. And you can see how it's related to some of the first drawings. So, and these are more recent ones that developed in a way that I was happy with. So
it definitely paid off drawing it ahead of time.
Oh, absolutely. I couldn't have done it without that. I had to try different relationships of the flower forms to the bases. Sometimes I cut pieces of paper out and make little models, or I make little clay maquettes. And I just fiddle around with things a lot before I actually make them. So,
You also mentioned that you find different relationships between the things that are in your sketchbook or your visual journal without having made those relationships beforehand. And because you saw them in the journal, this thing occurred to you to make these things together or to have a relationship with the pieces that wasn't necessarily in the thing from nature that you first saw.
I do a lot of hybrids that are things that are part of one sketch and part of another, and say, well, what if this was applied to that? Or I found a really nice book. Oh, all right. Well, this is from a book on folded paper designs, and I was really interested in that. I think I had a knee injury and I couldn't really do anything. So I got a lot of paper and just started folding it and doing things to it. And
Beautiful.
I liked some of the paper designs, and I thought, I wonder if I could make clay do that. Well, I didn't have a really good time with it at first. These two were attempts at getting that folded look. The top was supposed to be that spiral around piece. Can you go back one? Can you go back two, please?
Like this one?
Yeah.
Okay.
So if you look at that the second one, the square cut out and the spirals around, that's what the ended up being the tall piece that's reddish. And I thought with the paper, it folds really nicely and you get this nice crisp stuff. And I tried to do that, didn't work out. I did make that little clay piece, a little clay
For that.
trial. Yeah, that's clay for the top of the more cylindrical one or cone-shaped one, truncated cone. So you can see these are the resolutions of those two things. They do not look folded. I was not happy with them. And so I decided that what I had to start doing was, I also tried making a mold from cut up paper. That worked okay. But then I actually started cutting the clay like paper and putting it together. So some of them ended up being round. These were things that came from that.
Yeah, you really investigated this for quite a while.
Yeah,
Like last year, a lot of these pieces were in your show
right.
that you had.
But
Yeah.
they're all from the cut paper designs. If you look on the left, the flat things are what the paper designs were in the book on folded paper, and I made those. So I often will take paper and make things, and then I try to cut. So I thought they were really beautiful forms.
Lynn, were they, did you feel they were more successful before they were glazed? Did the glaze kind of mute that quality of the folded paper?
It does do that. It doesn't give that blankness. Let me see if there's, no, it's not here. Sorry, I had a piece that I just brought home that I tried to make look more like folded paper by spraying it all white and then putting black on the edges. Right. And I think that came across more as a folded paper piece. But I loved these forms, and I think I liked how the glaze came out. So it didn't bother me that you're right, it does take away
Soften it.
Folded look, but it's something else.
Go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, I was going to say, I'll work with a piece. If it starts doing something else and I can see a better resolution for that particular piece, I'll finish that piece and then try again. So
I think the important thing here too is that you're working through a concept. You know, you're starting with just a basic idea, and then you're carrying it out in all sorts of different directions and really spending a lot of time with it. And like you said in your notes earlier, developing a larger body of work on the same subject, because you're taking the time to go to your visual journal and think about it for a while in there, and then take those thoughts, either just leave them in the journal or take them out and use them, and then explore them more once you get into 3 dimensions. So you're really looking at your work really deeply, and trying to understand it and explore it and your attitudes toward it and everything by working in the journal and then in the clay. So that's cool. Did you have anything else you wanted to add to that?
No.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. So let's go back to our PowerPoint. Janine, who is here again, says it's very interesting to see how 3D artist works. She's very much 2D, as you know, if you know her. She does the fabulous alphabet animal cards in our shop at the pottery. All right, so let's go back to our PowerPoint from before. All right, so now we're going to start with the folks, Cheryl and Linka, that are doing very much the same thing, doing the exploration, doing the thoughts, but are doing it in a much different way. So the same thing, but kind of alike. Okay, so this is Linka's work. So Linka.
Yes, ma'am. So I work in visual journals, sketchbooks, thought-bound paper in 3 ways. They're either spur of the moment, where I see something and I record it, which is what is in the top right image. I don't start with white paper. I feel like it's scary and I just don't want to do that. So I mess it up and I print on it and I make color on it, and then I sketch on top of that. So this was a little girl in a restaurant, and she was very fussy and very busy, and I ended up with a sketch that's stiff, but it reminded me of the moment where I was. So it's a designed background. It's an image of a girl, a child. She was about 3 or 4, who couldn't sit still. And it was a moment I can remember now because I recorded that in my sketchbook as I was sitting and watching her. So a good bit of what I draw inside of journals or sketchbooks or thinking pages, or just where I am at the moment and what I see and how I want to, what interests me, what do I want to record, what do I want to preserve, because then that moment for me is now permanent. And I can go back to images in books 30 years ago and remember the smells and the circumstances and the people around me. It's a very visceral, located very specifically in my memory to make that drawing. And when I look at it again, I'm brought back to that moment because my hand recorded that. It wasn't a snap of a photo, although I'm an avid photographer. It was about remembering what it felt like being in that place with those people around me, with my hand to the paper and drawing what I saw.
So you're collecting everything. You're collecting emotions, you're collecting visual information, you're collecting thoughts, all on that page.
It's a complete repository of that moment. Another way I record and work inside of journals is to, I don't work through paintings the way you guys have described with 3D works. That's done in the process of, I'm not that organized. I'm very not that organized. I'm more impressionable. So I work in a design way. So sometimes like this particular page up in the right corner was something that had paint on it prior, and it had the space for the girl to drop into. But there would also be this space where I could just create a design, and it's very abstract and very emotive and playing color on color.
Kind of like this one.
Correct. And then it may also move forward like this, where it becomes almost this continuous additive, subtractive process. So like, I'm not satisfied with this design, so I may go back and paint over it, and it may have layer upon a layer upon a layer of more information. But all that information applies because I know it's underneath whatever the final is on top. So it's not ever forgotten. It's just a lower stair step onto the final result, which may be 5 or 6 steps above. And it may hold, I collect tons of quotes. So I have quotes inside of things. I have visual images and symbolism that drops inside of things. And all of that may play, and you can drop this and close the book and walk away, and then you can open it back up and you're 4 months away or 2 days away and add something else to it, which describes something completely different than where you originally started. Since I make my own journals, or I do books that I've created into journals, these have no precious sense. It's not white. I don't have to protect it, and I can just trash it out all over the place. And I add all sort of stuff that has nothing to do with what I'm going to, what I'm in the place of mentally. But once I put that down, then you build off of that and you build more away from that. So until you get to an end where you realize I have nothing else to say, it just keeps growing. And sometimes you just cover it up and you start all over.
You're almost doodling.
Yes, it's exactly what I'm doing. And that happens, I can't show you because I'm little, but I mean,
Okay.
doodle.
Yes. Does that look familiar, Marcia?
I can't see it.
Oh,
Well, it has no rhyme or reason. It's almost like my brain is doing heavy thoughts, but my hand is mitigating those heavy thoughts. So it becomes a balance between what is going on in my head and what is going on in my hand. And it works itself out. The third way.
sorry, go ahead.
The third way I react inside my journals is the bottom left piece, which deals with COVID. This in particular, because I have struggled with how to interact with people I care about that have different viewpoints than myself. And I looked at this as something I can't say out loud to the people I love, because it's not permissible without becoming an argument. So what I can do inside my journal is to say these things out loud, and then when distance allows, you can go back and revisit. And sometimes those are issues within my family, and sometimes those things are broader and world-ish, and sometimes they're just totally internal that nobody is going to know but me. And when you go back and look at it, I may even have trouble figuring out what that meant. And that's okay, because it gave me a repository to lay it down, and I didn't have to carry it anymore. So for me, a lot of times, a journal is a history. I can go back and find myself in that time frame when I created that piece. It is a design element where I am unconsciously working between positive and negative and color balancing, and playing with design and how do you make these parts work. And sometimes that information works into paintings or into sculptures or into, I make books as well. So sometimes that works into that. And then also it becomes a statement, because I don't want to be confrontational with people I love, and yet there has to be a place where you can say these things, and that becomes my journal.
I think one of the things that you're talking about right now is, instead of having a conversation with your relatives, you're having a conversation with your journal. And that was one of the things you mentioned to me before. And also, I think it's kind of, in a way, what Lynne and Scott are doing. They're not speaking it out loud. They're not using color. They're not using representational imagery, but they are having a conversation with their journal while figuring out how to make this thing that they want to make. So you're basically both having a conversation with what is on the page that you're creating yourself.
And like I said, I've gone back to earlier books, and I have a bazillion, and I find images that have evolved without my knowledge of me repeating them, which certainly says I need to look at this more deeply and try to figure out, why is this coming back, and do I need to make a more thorough investigation in what I do based on this, because it keeps coming back up. How is that important to me, and what is it asking me to say that I haven't yet expressed, that it is bubbling back up, and I need to discover why it keeps coming back and tapping me on the shoulder and saying, hey dummy.
Well, that's the same thing that Scott just said.
Yes.
About the, this shape keeps coming up, so he must have to make it.
Yes. And
so cool.
I find that those I teach are so in search of something new that they don't realize that the new is something they've already done, and they just need to look at it more deeply, which will give them a new format or shape or framework that they've been expressing all along. It's not new except to somebody else.
Cool. We don't seem to have any questions in the chat at the moment. Does anyone have one that they'd like to unmute themselves and ask Linka or Lynn or Scott? Yes. Okay, guess not. Thank you, Linka.
You're welcome.
And in relation to what Linka has discussed, we now have Cheryl. So Cheryl, I was also thinking that this is why, before we did the presentation, I asked Cheryl to send me some images. I asked everybody to send me some images, but Cheryl sent me some more recent ones, and then I asked her to send me some from a while ago. I don't know how much older these are, but pardon me?
They're about a year ago.
Okay, so it was important to me because I know Cheryl has, like every artist, she's changed the way that she's working with the materials that she's using now. And so I wanted everyone to see her progression, because as we've been talking about our journals, it's a history of the artist as an artist and the kinds of things that they do. And we're also going to see one of the book-like structures that Cheryl has made. So, so Cheryl, tell us about how you were working here with paper and with type.
Well, like Linka, I put my thoughts on paper and into my artwork. I do a little bit of the journaling that Lynn and Scott talked about and do. Not so precise, usually for jewelry. If I'm making jewelry and I have an idea, I'll write it down, and I'll even go to the point of like, okay, this is going to be brass, this is going to be copper, or whatever it is. But that's just to record my ideas, because I'll forget them. I mean, I'll forget once we stop, I'll forget what I said. I'm usually in my own head a lot, and I have a lot of thoughts going on. I have a lot of creativity going on in there. And part of my problem being an artist is that everything I see has a possibility. And so if I don't put it down on paper, or if I don't get it out of my head, I get stuck. So you can see that the one on the left that says transitions, I know I had just switched jobs. it was not a good transition for me. Um, Financially, it was a great transition, but emotionally, it was very difficult. My one savior is actually on this feed, so that's thank you, Janice. um, and so I would come home every day and make my artwork, and I actually at the time set up my studio in the living room because I just couldn't be by myself in the room by myself all day long, and then come home, be in the studio all day long by myself. I had just experienced a lot of grief in my family. There was a lot of death that happened one after another, and friends that I had lost. And so this was kind of like I'm free. Does that make sense? Like, I'm not a caretaker now. I'm not, I get to be me. I don't have to worry about what other people think or whatever. So when you look at the one on the right with the bright yellow, is always been my favorite color, was yellow. Don't know why. um, and so you can see that I'm starting to accept where I'm at. I'm starting to accept who I am, what I want to do. And everything I make on paper shows up in my jewelry and my pottery and my paintings. Sometimes I'm trying to work out a technique, a material. If there's a new material out there, then you'll see it in my work because I have to have it and I got to try it out. So if you look on the left, you see the white dots are paint. So there I'm using watercolors, and actually I think I had just gotten them as a gift from my good friend Marcy for Christmas. And so I used those, and then I had to go over it with some marker, and then I had other things happening. So, oh, I got to try this, the white paint. If you look on the right, I found out, hey, they make white pens. Well, I'm an illustrator, so I thought, well, this is great. And you can see I chose this drawing or mixed media piece here because you can see around the pieces I started to do these like little crisscross squiggly things, and almost like stitching. And I did that for a little while in my stuff, and I thought, you know what, I'm gonna try that. I'm gonna do these like on all my pages now. So I'm trying out this new little, like, I'm gonna do stitches, right? And they're not real stitches, but they turned into real stitches.
Yes, they did.
Yeah. So this is my newest journal that I just finished, actually. But if you look here, some of the pieces that are in here are from other artists. The one that you see up on the left with the trees was from an artist in Vermont. At a show, I took a card, and sometimes I'll cut up other people's work and put it in my work. And I stitched over it, and I may even go back and do some more to alter it so it's not like my work, it's their work too. The one on the right bottom is just another page from that journal. It's the other side of it. And these are all scraps from when I made a bajillion masks. And I thought, oh my gosh, I here I am at home, and I could be in my studio just painting and painting, but instead I'm making masks because it seemed like we needed to, right? And I know you were making them, and Marcy was making them, and I'm sure Lynne was making them, and we were all sewing away until our fingers hurt, right? But it was also therapeutic because I used all the fabric that was my mother's, and she was a quilter, and so I used this really beautiful fabric to create masks to help people. And I gave them all away. I did not sell them. I didn't want to sell them because it wasn't for that purpose for me. And I thought she would have been sitting right here doing the same thing. So it made me feel like I was doing something really important. So that got me into sewing again. So now guess where the sewing machine's still set up on the kitchen table. And, so it's convenient now. So I'm like, oh, look at this. I could do this. So in this journal that you see here, I used a lot of the leftover scraps from the mask making. I often will make collages or surface textures and then cut them up and put them into my projects, or old work. And you know, if I don't like it or I'm just sick of it, I'll tear it in half and just work over it instead of painting over it. I will just go for it. So this is the front cover, and I don't know why I needed to put arrows, like people wouldn't know to open it. I don't know. But it just, like, I had to do it. So I put the arrows there, like, okay, they'll know this is the front, right? I don't know why, you know, but when you look into it, it has a lot of paper and painting and different mediums inside. One of the mediums that came out of making this book, first of all, the first page and the second page, I think second or third page, I had done, well, let's see, I had a 3-year-old granddaughter, so at least 3 years ago, because they were pictures of the kids when they were first born, my grandkids. So I was kind of celebrating, and I thought, I'm going to put this in a book. Well, I got about 2 pages in and just kind of, I don't know if I lost it or put it aside. Probably lost it in my studio because it's a mess, but I don't care. That's how I work. So I found it again, and I thought, you know what? I'm going to finish this book because it needs to be finished. It's calling me. So I finished it, and as I went through it, there were quite a few pages that I really explored different techniques and new techniques and sewing techniques. And I think somewhere in between here, I had taken your class, Mary Ruth, with the fiber collage and the paper and sewing on the paper, which we were doing anyways, but I say we because Marcy and I do a lot of the same kinds of things. So I pushed it a little further, and I tend to do that. I was laughing because Lynne and Scott are so precise, and their skill and their technique in pottery is so freaking amazing. And now I see why. You actually plan it. Me, I'm like, I've got this 3-story building on a piece of paper going, can you slide the board underneath when I pick it up, because it's going to collapse? And sometimes they do, because I forget. Oh, I get so caught up in the moment that I forget that, you know, if you don't put the board under there, it's going to fall over. Or if you don't put something to keep it from falling over inside, you know, paper or whatever. So that's how I work. And if you look at it, it's kind of messy, it's kind of ADD, and it's kind of eclectic, and that's what's in my head. A lot is in my head. So I work out personal problems, I work out grief, I work out love, I work out memories, I work out what's going to happen on a canvas. That's what my journals are all about. So yeah, so here, this is my
the
studio.
inside of your head? Is this the inside of your head?
No,
Can
that's
I
my
smell it?
studio, but that pretty much explains it. And you see the coffee, I can't live without it. And yeah, I got a lot of crap. So what I'll do is literally take out, like, actually you inspired me to do this, Mary Ruth. I take out, like, okay, I'm going to work in this palette today, and so I'm going to only have on my desk these colors, and so that's what I'll do. Well, you can see this. This is like a eclectic mess of, like, okay, so I have yesterday's project, and the day before that's project, and a month ago's project, and a year ago's project. And so I just keep pushing it away and making a little space for myself. I actually went through my studio in the past couple of days after I watched this. I looked at this picture and thought, oh, I better clean. So I organized a few things, but it really doesn't look much different, to be honest with you.
So this is like a
So,
memorial to the way it
kind
used
of.
to.
And it's kind of, it's my thought process, and it's how I work. I work spontaneously. I don't think about it ahead of time, but I know I'm working things out as I'm working in my journals. So whether it's, I mean, I had a boss that was really not nice when I moved to this new position. She was very difficult, made my life a living hell. And so I wrote all about her, and I took her picture and I slapped it in there, and I took glue and I closed the book. And she didn't bother me again after that, so it was great, right? So sometimes it's that. Sometimes it's about recording a moment. Sometimes it's about exploring a technique, or whatever. But you'll see that in my work, whether it's jewelry or pottery or clay or whatever I'm doing, I used to throw on the wheel, but I don't do it anymore, so I just don't like it. But I love to hand build, and so you'll see in my work that everything I do shows up somewhere in what I'm making. So I don't know whether it's color or if it's just exploring or whatever, right?
Were you just waving at me, Linka? Yeah, you're muted again. Thank you, Cheryl. That was
No.
awesome, of course.
Good,
Yeah.
thank you.
Cheryl, I've never been accused of being precise, but having looked at your workshop, I have to say that you are definitely brave, because you will never see my workshop.
Oh, that was just a tiny piece. And I have like a pathway now because I taught over the summer online, and so I have my computer all set up and I got my other thing over here, and it's kind of like, okay, I'm going to do this, and okay, now we're going to do this, and okay, now we're going back to here. So I kind of liked that everything was in reach, and my dog seems to just love to lay right there at my feet. So if I get up, I usually fall down because you can't move in here. It's too much. It's just too much.
So thank you, everyone. Thank you, Lynn. Thank you, Cheryl. Thank you, Scott. Thank you, Linka. Does anyone have any questions? Feel free to unmute yourself and make yourself visible again. If you have a question to ask, I'm sure anybody would love to have your questions. Or you can put them in the chat.
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
If Lynn studied under, who was it that you studied under?
Mary Risley.
Mary Risley, then does that make me famous since I studied under you? Does that work?
Must work that way.
It does. I think it does. I'm going with it.
You didn't actually study under me, but that's in a very lovely way.
So what did you learn from Mary Risley, do you think?
Mostly do things over until they're perfect. That's not perfect enough. Do it again. Try this. Do you think that's good? No. Okay, well then do it again.
Oh my gosh, that's why
I needed it. No, I needed it. It was wonderful.
I would have walked right out the door.
No, she was very kind about it. Hey, most of us went to art school. You know what it's like there. They're much more harsh than that. I had a teacher one time say, "Whose shit is this on the wall?" And I had to say, "That's mine." So telling me, asking me, "Is it good enough? Is that what you really wanted?" And that keeps going in my head all the time. Is that what I wanted? Is that what I intended? Is it good enough? No, redo it, fix it, change it, alter it, whatever. So,
Yeah.
I bless her. She's wonderful. She was wonderful.
Yes, her work.
So I
was
have
good.
a question
Yes, ma'am.
for all of you.
Uh-huh.
So being closed down, shut out, reduced, changed, because even if you're not, if you're able to go back to your studio and do whatever what your process is, or if you have moved your studio to your own home, which is some of what I've done, and then gone back and forth, how has the pandemic affected your work? And do you feel, no, let me rephrase that. Do you feel the pandemic will make your work different from this point forward? Do you feel that rooting influence on your work?
Yes, absolutely for me. Absolutely. I would be in the jewelry studio right now working at Westland. I was talking to Linda about it today. We're going to work together, but it's very difficult because you can't really be around people. And when you are, then you have to quarantine and hope that they're not sick. And Mostly I miss my creative people around me. So
Yes.
I have a whole house full of studios. I mean, you know, if it was just me, the whole house would be a studio and I'd just get takeout every day because I could care less about cooking. And, you know, but I tried to talk my husband into a kiln to cook in, but he said no. So you know, so I have a pottery studio and I have a metal studio downstairs, but I don't go down there because there's no one else down there with me. And I know that's directly because of COVID and being home and not really getting around people. So I don't want to isolate myself in the basement. So I find myself doing a lot of creative work, drawing, spending time in my gardens. I mean, I spent a lot of time outside. So yeah, it's definitely affected me. And I think just the whole slow down and really evaluate where your life's at and what you want your life to be, being in the house all the time and not being at work. And I got to say, 5 months off was really nice. You know, even though we were working at home, it was still really nice, right? But you
You're
can't
at home.
stay in your house forever, you know. So yeah, it's going to follow us. I think it'll follow all of us, but it's definitely
So-
following me.
Marcia, did you have a
Yeah.
thought?
Mhm.
Well, I was just thinking that this was what we talked about last week, and it will change each and every one of us. It's not will it definitely already has. And
Absolutely.
just, you know, just the fact, like Cheryl says, that we can't go to a place with others. I mean, I pick Cheryl's brain, what little brain there is, I will say.
Thanks,
And,
Martha.
well, I pick Lynne's brain too a lot, but
I know.
you know, but not having that, and you could talk on the phone, you could text, you could do all that stuff. It's not the same as sitting there with something in front of you, whether it's clay or whatever it may be, and having that creative energy develop with a group.
Yep.
So I think every single one of us who, and I don't think it's just artists, but we're speaking of artists, that we're all having to learn a new way to interact in the world. So yes, absolutely. That's all I have to say.
Yeah.
I'm done now.
Barry?
Hey, thanks. I wanted to agree with Cheryl and Marcia that this event right here is so great. I'm so appreciative of it because not being able to be around other people is just it's very hard not to have that creative energy that you're talking about. I mean, being in the studio at Wesleyan, being there to teach and sharing ideas. I mean, I don't know about you, Scott, but I feel I learn as much as I teach from people's ideas. And so I think this has been a great event. I loved what you guys showed. Linka and Cheryl, thank you so much, because I feel like I have so much angst inside of me about the pandemic and about the election. I don't know how to get it out without, having a fit in front of my poor husband by, just being so frightened about everything. So showing me how to do that in a creative way will be really helpful.
I feel
That's
like
a really
we're
good
at Hollywood
point.
Squares. I'm looking at the gallery view and we're on Hollywood Squares now.
Totally.
I thought it was the Muppets myself.
Yes, that's
Only you, Marcia.
So which Muppet do you want to be, Marcia?
Miss Piggy.
Oh,
She's my
yes.
favorite.
I am Miss Piggy. I have done Miss Piggy. I am Miss Piggy.
I've always wanted to be Kermit.
Yeah, yep. Well, then we'll have to get together, Mary.
Did anyone else have anything else that they want to add?
It was good. It was
Oh.
great. I enjoyed it.
Yes.
I would just like to thank Mary Ruth
Yep.
and
Yes.
everybody who's in attendance for the opportunity to mouth off, I guess. It doesn't happen very often these days. And, you know, as I mentioned when I talked, I like being a teacher. I miss that very much. I don't have a studio of my own, so I'm not making pots. My method of creativity these days is carrying around my notebook.
Yeah.
And it's about as far as it goes right now. So I really appreciate the opportunity to do this.
Me
Thank
too.
you.
Yeah.
Yes.
The other thing, Mary Ruth, is that this has been great. And I don't know how frequently this kind of group gets together and has a topic to talk about inside of the studios. So the potential for carrying something like this forward beyond the pandemic might be a good thing to have, because, you know, when would we get together and listen to this kind of exchange, right?
Yeah, that's a good point. Thank you very much for that comment. I will definitely carry that forward.
Good.
So, okay, well, thank you so much. We're only an hour, or no, not quite an hour, half an hour over our time limit. So thank you, Zoom. So thank you everyone for coming. I see some people that I don't know, which is really cool. If you wouldn't mind in the comment or in the chat, just telling whatever comment you want to leave and letting me know how you found out about it. If you're related to Cheryl, you don't need to bother. I already know. And if you are from Wesleyan Potters, I don't need to know that either. And if you're Linka, I don't need to know how you found out about this, because I know already. So thank you very much, everyone. It was really super. I appreciate the people that were on with me, Cheryl and Lynne and Scott and Linka, for putting up with me. And I really appreciate everyone coming. So really super. Thank you very much. And actually, I do have, whoops, nope, not that. I do have one more slide. There we go. So I just want to remind everybody that I do have myself an event coming up in a few weeks on September the 8th. I know a lot of people that are into all sorts of different kinds of textiles. So if you're a weaver, a sewer, if you are a fashion designer or you know someone, then this is a great tutorial. I'm going to start from the very, very basic, how to understand what textiles are made from, and go into how textiles are made. So this is a great seminar for a lot of people. And of course, it is done with the support of the Department of Economic and Community Development and the Connecticut Office of the Arts, which makes it free. So also, if you aren't already on the Wesleyan Potters email list, you're going to want to email and make sure that you ask to be put on the mailing list to find out about future Zoom events through the pottery, because we're going to be having classes and all sorts of really cool stuff like that online. So thank you very much, everyone, and have a good evening.
Thank you all.
Mary Ruth.
Everybody.
Good night.
Night. Good
I
night.
might just start a
Bye,
journal.
everyone.
Bye. Thanks for coming.
Hey, everyone.
Thank you, thank you.
Linka, you and I are talking on the phone. I think she already left.
She left you.
Bye. Thanks, everyone.
Ciao, ciao.
Thanks, Mary.
Bye.